Pops. You've done something incredibly foolish, no, something worse. I can't even find a word for how utterly ridiculous this is. But this? Couldn't you have read the guidebook about this place? Ranma, barely able to control his frustration, stood in his current, feminine form. Genma, now in the body of a giant panda, held up a sign that read, "Now, son." "Don't now son me," Ranma snapped, hating the way his chest moved with each breath, feeling an uncomfortable sensitivity. But these weren't his, and the shirt wasn't his either. It was hers, his female form was still intact. Genma stubbornly held up another sign, but the guidebook is in Chinese. "Only the left side of the book is in Chinese, Pops," Ranma said, barely holding back her irritation. "The right side is in Japanese." The panda's sign flipped. "Oh." The next side read, "We just need to boil water to reverse the curse. Until the next time we're splashed with cold water, Pops. Think about it. It's the rainy season. We won't get far without getting soaked." Genma, not having a counter to his daughter's words, focused instead on the boiling water. His sign read, "There. The water is ready." He flipped it, "Here's yours." Another flip showed, "And here's mine." "Pops!" Ranma exclaimed. "My share is smaller than yours." "Why is that?" "I'm bigger." The panda's sign said, followed by, "Here," as he tossed the water to Ranma and poured the rest over himself. The hot water splashed on female Ranma, but nothing happened. She remained female. "Pops!" Ranma shouted. "You can't even boil water properly." Despite her anger, Ranma noticed something odd about her father. He was still a panda, but he seemed smaller, and something about him had changed. But there were more pressing issues at hand. "What did you do wrong, Pops?" Ranma demanded. "Nothing," the sign read. "I got the water from that spring." The arrow on the next flip pointed to the lake behind them. Another flip showed, "I boiled the water." "How hard is that?" "Pops." Ranma's voice was a mix of panic and anger. "You got the water from that spring?" she asked, standing and pointing toward the body of water nearby. "Yes," the panda's sign read. Flipping it, "Why?" "Pops," Ranma growled, "which spring did I fall into?" "That one," Genma's sign answered. The arrow pointed again to the same body of water. Then, a light bulb appeared on the next side, shining brightly. The sign flipped again, reading, "Oops." Nearly a month later, a young figure, cloaked against the rain, walked through the muddy streets of Ranma, a district in Tokyo. The destination was a dojo owned by the Tendo family. This figure moved with the weariness of someone who had given up hope. Arriving a bit early, there was no rush. The figure was expected, yet somehow, not truly awaited. A knock on the door of the Tendo home heightened the anticipation of everyone inside. The unresolved arguments still hung in the air. Satone Nodoka felt a mix of emotions. She was pleased that her husband and son were finally returning from their 10-year training journey, one intended to make her son a true man, but also saddened that he was returning to an arranged marriage with one of the Tendo girls. The problem was, no one knew which one. Tendo-son, too, was torn. He was happy his old friend was returning with his son, the one who would marry his daughter and continue the dojo's legacy. But he was sad that his daughters hadn't yet decided who would marry the son of his dear friend. Tendo Kasumi felt similarly conflicted. She was relieved that she was no longer part of the arranged marriage her father and his friend had planned a decade ago, but saddened by the tension it created in the household, a tension she had to manage as the housekeeper. Tendo Nabiki, always calculating, was both pleased and wary. The arrival of her father's friend and his son was sure to stir chaos, and in chaos, there was profit. She was also saddened because, unlike Kasumi, she wasn't completely off the hook for this arranged marriage. Tendo Akane, too, was torn. She was relieved she had managed to avoid pressure from her sisters to marry the boy, but still worried that everyone thought she was the most likely candidate. For a long moment, no one moved. Then another knock echoed through the house. Everyone looked at Kasumi. "I'll get the door," she said quietly. Kasumi went to the door and opened it, revealing a cloaked figure. The face beneath the hood was barely visible, and the pack on the figure's back gave no clues to their identity. "Ranma?" Kasumi asked. "Satom Ranma?" The cloaked figure nodded in response. Stepping aside, Kasumi said, "Welcome to our home, Satom Ranma. Please, come in." The figure entered, and Kasumi, looking outside, asked, "Isn't your father with you?" Instead of answering, the figure shook its head. "Well, I suppose he'll arrive later," Kasumi said, leading the cloaked figure to the others. As the family watched, the figure dramatically lowered the hood. Gasps filled the room as they saw a beautiful girl with bright red hair and deep blue eyes, features that didn't quite match her Japanese appearance. After several moments of stunned silence, Kasumi spoke first. "Oh, dear. We were expecting Genma and his son, Ranma." The girl spoke, her voice even more feminine than her appearance. "Pops won't make it. I'm Ranma." Everyone froze, then, all at once. Satom Nodoka asked, "Where is my son? My husband?" Tendo-san broke down in tears. Tendo Kasumi asked, "Will you be staying long? Would you like some tea?" Tendo Nabiki was silent, her mind racing with ideas of how to profit from the girl's beauty. Tendo Akane jumped to her feet and shouted, "Pervert!" The red-haired girl stood still, her expression unreadable. Once the room settled down, she spoke again. "I'll answer your questions, all of them. But first, let me tell you about my training trip." Turning toward Satom Nodoka, she began, "Mother, I didn't want to leave you when Pops and I went. I wanted to go, though. At that age, I would have done anything to improve my skills in the art. For 10 years, Pops and I traveled the world. I learned a lot from him, mostly in spite of him. But the most important lesson I learned too late." Pausing for a breath, she continued, "Pop's ideas about training were unconventional. How I survived even half of it, I still don't understand. I can't believe half of what he put me through, and I was there. But I won't bore you with the details, those don't matter as much as the answers to your questions." She made sure everyone was listening, then continued, "Remember one thing about my early training. Pops did some truly foolish, reckless, and dangerous things, so dumb that there isn't a word that truly describes it. But nothing he did before, well, it was nothing compared to the most idiotic thing he ever did. We went to China, to an area the government had sealed off. We crossed minefields, avoided razor wire, snuck past guard posts, anything that would stop a normal person. But not Pops. And not me. Within this area was a land of springs. I don't know how many there were, but it was a lot. The place is called Jizenkiya Springs, and the water there is magical. Pops didn't bother to read the guidebook, though I'm not sure why an area so heavily guarded even needed one. As with much of my training, Pops rushed into attack. By then, I had grown accustomed to his unconventional methods, heck, he even cheated. He tried to strike before we'd officially started. He gave it a shot, but, as always, he failed. I was ready. As he lunged, I used his momentum against him, sending him crashing into one of the springs. I stood there, waiting for him to emerge, soaking wet and furious. But when he didn't surface, not exactly the way I expected. Ranma's face remained as beautiful as ever, though pain from the memories flickered across her expression. I waited, but instead of Pops, a giant panda emerged from the water. Giant pandas are gentle creatures, Akane remarked, oblivious. Giant pandas may be, but this one was my Pops. He'd fallen into the spring of the drowned giant panda, one of the cursed springs. I'll admit, I was shocked by what happened next. My surprise slowed me down just enough for Pops to land a hit. I was thrown backward, landing in another spring, the spring of the drowned girl. I've heard of Jizenkyu's springs, Nabiki commented. Each spring is named for something that drowned there. Cold water triggers the curse, but hot water reverses it. Saton no Doka remarked, my son is part man, part woman. I can live with that, as long as the man half is a real man and the woman half a true woman. Tendo-san, still tearful after seeing his daughter, began to cry again. My daughter's to marry a half-man, half-woman? Then, after a pause, he stopped crying and said thoughtfully, the dojo will continue, before breaking into joyful tears once again. Tendo Kasumi simply said, oh, my. Tendo Nabiki, quiet, was already formulating ways to profit from this unexpected situation. Tendo Akane, growing tired of the spectacle, shouted, pervert. Get him some hot water. Ranma raised her hand, silencing the room instantly. You haven't heard everything yet. More? They all asked, almost in unison. Unfortunately, yes. Remember when I said Pops took stupidity to new heights? Well, he bought a guidebook but never bothered to read the Japanese pages. He stopped after the first page, which was in Chinese. Anyway, once things settled, I read in the book how to reverse the curse. I told Pops we needed to heat some plain water. He went to get it while I started the fire. With his paws being too large to handle matches, I had to do it. Eventually, the water was heating. We talked while we waited. I, amongst other things, asked him if he could possibly be any more foolish. At that moment, I couldn't see how things could get any worse. But when the water was hot enough, Pops poured some into a bowl for me, tossing it my way as he poured the rest over himself. The room fell silent, sensing that something worse was coming. The bowl of water slipped from my hands, splashing all over me. I waited for the change, but it didn't come. I looked at Pops. At first, I didn't notice anything different. He was still a panda, and I was still a girl. That's when Pops finally told me where he got the water. No, Satom no Doka said, shaking her head. Genma wouldn't be that foolish. Yes, he would, the girl replied. The others were still confused. Tendo Akane, frustrated by the whole ordeal, grabbed the teapot from the table and splashed hot water onto the girl. Nothing happened. Saton no Doka sighed. He really was that stupid. Tendo-san broke into tears again, though he wasn't sure why. Tendo Kasumi said softly, oh, my, her understanding clear. Tendo Nabiki, no longer thinking of profit, realized what had happened. Tendo Akane, confused, asked, why didn't anything happen? Why isn't it working? Ranma, now a bit wetter, explained, my father, that idiot, used Nyaniquin water. Tendo Akane frowned. Nyaniquin water? Tendo Nabiki clarified, yes, Akane. Nyaniquin water, water from the spring of the drowned girl. Ranma is stuck as a girl forever. Satom no Doka, looking furious, said, when I get my hands on that husband of mine. She paused, turning to her daughter, and asked, where is your father? Since giant pandas are nearly extinct, I donated him to the Tokyo Zoo as breeding stock, Ranma replied. Satom no Doka wasn't satisfied. So, all he does is eat all day and occasionally mate with a female panda? He's gotten off too easy. Maybe we should make panda soup out of him. Ranma raised her hand again, a small smile playing on her lips. I don't think you quite understand. Like me, Pops is cursed to remain a giant panda, and like me, he's stuck as a female. That night at the Tokyo Zoo, a female giant panda held up a sign that read, not tonight, I have a headache. Unfortunately for the zoo's newest female giant panda, named Dingaling by the woman who donated her, the male pandas couldn't read. And unfortunately for her, her cursed form made her highly fertile and quite attractive to the male pandas. She lived a long life, surprising all the experts by reaching nearly 35 years in captivity, nearly double the lifespan of any other known giant panda. Over her lifetime, she produced over 50 baby pandas, always a boy and a girl, twins. Experts could never explain the signs she seemed to produce when she first arrived, though the male pandas quickly helped her forget that habit. And every day of Dingaling's life, a beautiful red-haired, blue-eyed Japanese woman visited her and smiled.